Hey, want to take a walk on the wild side and experience the bleeding edge of technology? Then get ready, because it doesn't get much more edgy than this. You're in for a wild ride. You're listening to Sovryn Tech with your host, the man in triple black, the golden stallion of the tech world, Brian Sovryn. He's got a huge brain. And now, here's Brian.
You wanted the best, and you got the best. That's right. Brian Sovryn here with you, the golden stallion of the tech world, ready to spread the seed of liberty once again, just as I do every single Saturday, or whenever you happen to listen to the show. You know, the nice thing about Sovryn Tech is that it's pretty. I think it's pretty timeless, and I kind of designed the show to be that way, to where yes, it's kind of a current events technology show and science show in a way, but at the same time, all of it's always still kind of relevant. And so you can go back, where this is episode 53, and however many 14, 15, some odd specials. Which, boy, I got to tell you, I just got done recording a special that'll be coming out this coming Wednesday. And I mean, this is going to be big stuff. Big announcement on this special. It'll be coming out on the 25th. It's my Christmas present to you, or should I say my Saturnalia present to you. So I hope you'll enjoy that. It's all about Bitcoin, and it's really, really incredible stuff. So look for that. I had a great guest on. Really, you're gonna love it. So check that out on the 25th on Saturnalia Day. When it's Saturnalia, you got to do as the Romans do. And what did the Romans do? They had orgies. It's true. Anyway. I want to get into, our rapid fire stories, and I also have a special topic I want to talk about in a moment. And also, we're going to have this episode is going to do something two things kind of new. You'll see what they are, but I'll tell you, one of them is going to be that I've got a story that's so large it's going to cover two segments of the show. So it's the Tech Roulette story, but I'm going to have it take over as the main story as well, because there's just so much to cover. And it's all about DARPA, yeehaw, or about, the government and technology in general anyway. But, just the initial announcements. Of course, Sovryn Tech does accept Bitcoin, Litecoin, and ProtoShares. All the links for that can be found in the show notes, or the addresses, the physical addresses. You can find them in the show notes, or if you go to sovryntech.com, you look at the top left, there's QR codes and physical addresses there as well for you to send to. So, please don't hesitate to do that. And let's see what else. So much to cover. Anyway, let's get right into it. I'm not going to start screaming and hollering about this, but as far as rapid fire stories, Apple apparently, through some kind of firmware exploit, the cameras, like we mentioned, how the FBI could turn on cameras on any computer through like a malware. Through malware, they could turn on without the indicator light coming on, they could turn on the camera. And now Apple, apparently anybody can do it, not just the FBI, but anybody can do it with Apple EyeSight cameras that are built into pretty much every Apple computer out there. Scary, that exists, but I imagine it's something that's going to be getting addressed, but just letting you know that it's out there. Also, another really interesting story is that Tim Draper. Now, Tim Draper, if you don't know who he is, I mean, this is a tech magnate, okay? This is a guy behind Outlook, behind a lot of things, or he's, involved with a lot of things, and he is now making a proposal in the state of California for California to get split into 6 states. Incredible. One of them, of course, one of those states being Silicon Valley. And obviously, now why do they want to do this? Well, because in certain parts, they want to do different things. They want the laws to, apply to the areas that they want to, like there could be a state that's, more concentrated on making movies essentially there. And so the laws could work towards, could be beneficial to the idea of making movies in an area. So maybe construction codes could be different there. And in Silicon Valley, different things can occur. It's interesting. It's essentially, he's wanting a bunch of free state projects, and good for him. Fine. I say let it happen. I don't care much for political solutions, but whatever. I'm glad people are, and I'm least glad that the tech world, and this isn't the first time the tech world's been open to this, but I'm glad the tech world is talking about, really, secession. That's a conversation. I agree with Ian Freeman every time he says this. That's a conversation that needs to be had, is secession. So anyway, so I'm excited about that. Also, the Department of Homeland Security, these are the people that are protecting Americans. These are people that, they have the most important jobs in the country. Apparently a lot of their workforce is unpaid interns. Now, I don't know about you, but we do live in a world, unfortunately, where incentive is the order of the day. What exact incentive is there for unpaid interns to make sure that everybody's doing okay and that everybody's safe? I don't think there is any. So that's how bad it is. Maybe they can't actually find people to work for them, and so they're like hounding the colleges. But I find the Department of Homeland Security in and of itself is disturbing, but I find that whole thing disturbing. So, but anyway, something I want to talk about. I am on Google+. Okay, Sovryn Tech isn't officially on Google+, but I have a Google+ page, for better, for worse, for whatever it is. I like it more than I like Facebook anyway, and to some degree I'm required to have Google+, just to be able to play Android games and whatever else. It's part of the program now. So anyway, someone posted, I share my show on Google+, and please, if you want to help out the show, aside from donations, if you don't want to do donations or anything, if you want to help out the show, sharing the show on social media or, like on Google+ or on Facebook, or if you want to, share it on Twitter, and actually if you want to follow Sovryn Tech on Twitter, that's at Sovryn Tech, please, that'll be a huge, huge help. And also you can follow the show on SoundCloud, which is also a huge, huge help. But anyway, I share my show, which, you're implored to do as well. I share my show on Google+, and someone commented on it because it's a public page, nothing to hide here. And he kind of... he raised some great points and some great concerns. He said he used to listen to the show. He got tired of kind of the social, the fact that I would kind of bring morality into technology. And I understood what he was saying. He didn't want, he wants to hear tech news and he wants to hear about what to do. And he has a second half to his question of should we be making our own internet? I will get into that in a future episode. But I want to address his point. Why does Sovryn Tech, why do we bring in these issues of liberty, anarchy, all empathy, all these different areas into science and technology? And to address this, I don't think I have the words. I don't think I can say it as well as a personal hero of mine could say it. And the personal hero that I'm going to conjure up is Carl Sagan. And actually, I'd like to dedicate this entire show. In fact, Sovryn Tech in its entirety could be dedicated to Carl Sagan. But this show in particular, Carl Sagan died in, I believe, 1996 on December 20th, which was just yesterday. And so I consider it a great honor to have him speaking, obviously from a recording, no duh, but to have him speaking on Sovryn Tech. And so here we go.
My feeling, Charlie, is that it's not that pseudoscience and superstition and New Age so-called beliefs and fundamentalist zealotry are something new. They've been with us for as long as we've been human. But we live in an age based on science and technology with formidable technological powers.
Science and technology are propelling us forward at accelerating rates.
That's right. And if we don't understand it, by we I mean the general public, if it's something that, I'm not good at that, I don't know anything about it, then who is making all the decisions about science and technology that are going to determine what kind of future our children live in? Just some members of Congress? But there's no more than a handful of members of Congress with any background in science at all. And the Republican Congress has just abolished its own Office of Technology Assessment, the organization that gave them bipartisan competent advice on science and technology. They say, we don't want to know. Don't tell us about science and technology.
Surprising, the danger of all this. I mean, this is not the thing that...
There's two kinds of dangers. One is what I just talked about, that we've arranged a society based on science and technology in which nobody understands anything about science and technology. And this combustible mixture of ignorance and power sooner or later, is going to blow up in our faces. I mean, who is running the science and technology in a democracy if the people don't know anything about it? And the second reason that I'm worried about this is that science is more than a body of knowledge. It's a way of thinking, a way of skeptically interrogating the universe with a fine understanding of human fallibility. If we are not able to ask skeptical questions, to interrogate those who tell us that something is true, to be skeptical of those in authority, then we're up for grabs for the next charlatan, political or religious, who comes ambling along. It's a thing that Jefferson laid great stress on. It wasn't enough, he said, to enshrine some rights in a Constitution or a Bill of Rights. The people had to be educated, and they had to practice their skepticism and their education. Otherwise, we don't run the government. The government runs us.
And I don't think I could say it any better. There's a lot of reasons I do sovereign tech. Obviously, of course, you know, I want my opinions out there. But at the same time, I want people to understand the society we live in. And like Carl Sagan said, the truly great Carl Sagan said, if we don't understand it, we're up for grabs. As humans, you know, and he'd be the first one to say, forget these borders. That's all bullshit and nonsense. Morality, you know, the social aspects of science and technology are just as important as any other aspect of science and technology. It may be the most important part because, like Carl Sagan said, if we don't understand it, then the person that does is going to end up ruling you. And I don't know about you, but I'm an anarchist, and I don't want to be ruled, nor do I want to rule anyone else. So it's very, very important that we know about these things, and that we know about them with the proper context and with an important attitude, that being, you know, the anarchist attitude, the non-hierarchical attitude. That's all I really mean by anarchy is, you know, non-hierarchy. One person isn't above the other. So thank you, Carl Sagan, for saying that. Very powerful words from a genuine inspiration of mine. And in fact, actually, I had mentioned I did a podcasting special a little while back, and I believe in that I mentioned that, I really, as far as my style, how I like to present things, showing science and technology with a good understanding of history, I totally took that from, was totally inspired from Carl Sagan. So anyway, great honor, great man, truly missed, died 17 years ago on December 20th. It's great to, I'm more than honored to play any words from that man. Anyway, so to understand, let's get right to it, to our main story, which is going to cross segments here. This was actually sent by an emailer. To understand, like Carl Sagan was saying, we won't be in control of the government will be in control of us. Well, here's an area where maybe we can look into and see the history of the government and technology, a good long history. And this actually comes from Gizmodo, and by Matt Novak, and it's DARPA tried to build Skynet in the 1980s. Now, if you don't know what Skynet is, they did a lot more than just Skynet. But anyway, if you don't know what Skynet is, the Terminator saga franchise, there's the movies with Arnold Schwarzenegger and all that. You find out that essentially the military created a computer that, controlled all of the military and all this stuff. And this computer gets some degree of self-awareness, or at least, it considers humans a danger. And so it starts killing humans. And then there's a rebellion against Skynet throughout the films and the TV show and the video games and all that jazz. All very intriguing stuff. I'm somewhat of a fan of the Terminator franchise. So anyway, so that's what Skynet is. And apparently the government tried to build it in the 1980s. Fancy that. From 1983 to 1993, DARPA spent over $1 billion on a program called the Strategic Computing Initiative. The agency's goal was to push the boundaries of computers, artificial intelligence, and robotics to build something that, in hindsight, looks strikingly similar to the dystopian future of the Terminator movies. They wanted to build Skynet. Much like Ronald Reagan's Star Wars program, the idea behind strategic computing proved too futuristic for its time. Now, the Star Wars program was like this laser defense system to be built around the Earth that could defend, a lot of speculation as to what that was actually meant to defend from. But anyway, with the stunning advancements we're witnessing today in military AI and autonomous robots, it's worth revisiting this nearly forgotten program and asking ourselves if we're ready for a world of hyper-connected killing machines. And perhaps a more futile question, even if we wanted to stop it, is it too late? If the new generation, this is a quote from the paper about the Strategic Computing Initiative. Let's see. If the new generation technology evolves as we now expect, there will be unique new opportunities for military applications of computing. For example, instead of fielding simple guided missiles or remotely piloted vehicles, we might launch completely autonomous land, sea, and air vehicles capable of complex, far-ranging reconnaissance and attack missions. The possibilities are quite startling and suggest that new generation computing could fundamentally change the nature of future conflicts. That's from a little-known document presented to Congress in October of 1983 outlining the mission of the new Strategic Computing Initiative, or SCI. And like nearly everything DARPA has done before and since, it's unapologetically ambitious. The vision for SCI was wrapped up in a completely new system spearheaded by Robert Kahn, then Director of Information Processing Techniques Office, which IPTO, at DARPA. As it's explained in the 2002 book Strategic Computing, Kahn wasn't the first to imagine such a system, but he was the first to articulate a vision of what SC might be, SC being strategic computing. He launched the project and shaped its early years. SC went on to have a life of its own, run by other people, but it never lost the imprint of Kahn. The system was supposed to create a world where autonomous vehicles not only provide intelligence on an enemy worldwide, but could strike with deadly precision from land, sea, and air. It was to be a global network that connected every aspect of the U.S. military's technological capabilities that depended on new, impossibly fast computers. But the network wasn't supposed to process information in a cold, matter-of-fact way. No, this new system was supposed to see, hear, act, and react. Most importantly, it was supposed to understand, all without human prompting. The origin of strategic computing is often associated with the technological competition brewing between the U.S. and Japan in the early 1980s. The Japanese wanted to build a new generation of supercomputers as a foundation for artificial intelligence capabilities. Pairing the economic might of the Japanese government with Japan's burgeoning microelectronics and computer industry, they embarked on their fifth-generation computer system to achieve it. If you're wondering about the fifth-generation computer system, this all really has to do with, if you're wondering what that is, there's links here, and of course you can go to the show notes, sovereigntech.com, and you can read this whole story. There's a lot of pictures and other business and lots of links to check out, okay? But what I can describe more of what I know about, I will describe more to you. And the fifth-generation computer system, this is really where Japan's whole fascination with robots comes from. And they weren't thinking military applications. They were thinking, things a little more servile, like the service industry. Japan has been so obsessed with robots for so long. Like you even take the Famicom, which most people in this country, in the United States, know of as the Nintendo Entertainment System. But it was in Japan, it was literally called the Family Computer. This came out in the 80s, in the mid 80s, right around the time of what they're talking about here with the Strategic Computing Initiative. And there was a little robot that you could get with the NES because again, this was all part of this stuff. I mean, Japan was just hyper obsessed with what they call the fifth generation computer system, or essentially AI robots, AI controlled robots. So we'll go on with the story a bit. The goal was to create unbelievably fast computers that would allow Japan to leapfrog other countries, most importantly the United States and its emerging Silicon Valley, in the race for technological dominance. They gave themselves a decade to accomplish this task, but much like the United States, no matter how much faster they made their machines, they couldn't seem to make them smarter with strong AI. Japan's ambition terrified many people in the U.S. who worried that America was losing its technological edge. This fear was stoked in no small part by a 1983 book called The Fifth Generation, Artificial Intelligence and Japan's Computer Challenge to the World by Edward A. Feigenbaum and Pamela McCorduck, which was seen as a must-read on Capitol Hill. As a way to tell the SCI to the American people and to private interests, DARPA insisted, as a way to sell, not tell, DARPA insisted that its goal was explicitly for the nation's economic interests from the get-go. Spin-offs of the technology being developed were sure to stimulate America's economy, according to the DARPA planning document. Quote from it, "The consumer electronics industry will integrate new generation computing technology and create a home market for applications of machine intelligence. Reaching out to the private sector and the university system would also ensure that the best and brightest were contributing to DARPA's mission for the program." Quote from the document, "Equally important is technology transfer to industry, both to build up a base of engineers and system builders familiar with computer science and machine intelligence technology now resident in leading university laboratories, and to facilitate incorporation of the new technology into corporate product lines. To this end, we will make use of regulations of government procurement involving protection of proprietary information and trade secrets, patent rights, and licensing and royalty arrangements." The long and short of it, the government gave assurances to private industry that the technology developed wouldn't be handed off to competing companies. But economic competition with the Japanese, while very much a motivator, was almost a sideline concern for many policymakers embroiled in Cold War politics. Military buildup was the prime concern for the more hawkish members of the Republican Party. The military threat from the Soviet Union was seen by many of them as the larger issue, and SCI was designed to address that threat head on. So there's quite a bit more to the story, and we're going to, again, this is going to cross, after the break, we're just going to keep going with this. So let's talk a little bit about the Star Wars program that is relative to SCI. The launch of the Strategic Computing Program and DARPA's request for proposals in 1983 and 1984 set off a heated debate in the academic community, the same community that would ultimately benefit from DARPA funding from this project. Some were skeptical that the ambitious plans for advanced artificial intelligence could ever be accomplished. Others worried that advancing the cause of AI for the military would usher in a terrifying era of autonomous robot armies. It was a valid concern if the goal of Star Wars, the popular nickname for Ronald Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative, different from the Strategic Computing Initiative, and a popular political football at the time, was an automated response or semi-automated response to any missile threat from the Soviets. It would seem absurd not to tie into a larger network of truly intelligent machines. The missions of the two projects, not to mention their originating institutions, overlapped too much to be a coincidence, despite everyone's insistence that it was just that. From a 1988 paper by Chris Habels-Gray, the Star Wars Battle Manager, probably the most complex and the largest software project ever, is conceptually, though not administratively, a part of the Strategic Computing Initiative. Making the scientific breakthroughs in computing that the SDI needs is a key goal of the SCI, the Strategic Computing Initiative. If you ask anyone who worked on the SCI at the highest levels, as Roland did for his 2002 book on the project, they'll insist that SCI had nothing to do with Ronald Reagan's dream from Star Wars. But right from strategic computing's early days, people were making connections between SCI and the SDI. The connective tissue came in part simply because the program shared similar names and were even named by the same man. Whether or not you believe SCI was going to function as an arm of the Star Wars mission for space-based defense, there's no denying that if both had worked out, they would have been natural collaborators. And we will be back with more of this right after the break.
Got an energy spike.
Launch. In the third age of mankind, an age plagued by an evil empire that seeks to destroy humanity, it is our last, best hope for peace. It is Babylon 5.
All fighter squadrons launched.
Get us out of here.
Return fire.
Well, freeze them! Watch Babylon 5.
You can watch Babylon 5 and experience the greatest show in television history. See the entire series completely free by going to thewb.com/shows/Babylon 5.
Tech Roulette Want to play?
Of course, it is time for Tech Roulette, and we've actually been doing Tech Roulette for the first segment of the show and now the second segment of the show, and I want to get right back into the article that we were just reading, and of course the connection being made between the Strategic Computing Initiative and the Strategic Defense Initiative, the Star Wars project, and of course, the SCI. So anyway, let's continue on. We've pretty much made the connection there that the two were going to work together in some form or other. Some people admitted it. Other people who have done write-ups on the strategic computing project said that, no, it really wasn't a part of it. But anyway, they're probably just saying that to make it less scary. So let's move on. The 1983 chart above, which you can look at in the show notes, outlined the mission of strategic computing. The goal was clear: develop a broad base of machine intelligence tech to increase national security and economic strength. But to do that, Congress and the military institutions that would eventually benefit from SCI would need to see it in action. SCI had 3 applications that were supposed to prove its potential, though it would acquire many more by the late 1980s. Leading the charge were the autonomous land vehicle, the pilot's associate, and the aircraft carrier battle management system. So these are 3 technologies that we're going to talk about. These applications were built on top of the incredibly advanced computers that were being developed at places like BBN, the Cambridge company, probably best known for its work on developing the early internet. So these are the same guys that pretty much came up with ARPANET. Anyway, let's talk about, there's the driverless vehicle of 1985, and you got to see the pictures. Please go to the show notes and check this stuff out. It's pure 80s cheese, and while beautiful in its 80s cheese, it is genuinely terrifying in considering who would have had control of this kind of stuff. The most ominous-looking product to emerge from SCI was the autonomous land vehicle. The 8-wheeled unmanned ground vehicle was 10 feet tall and 13.5 feet long, with a camera and sensors mounted on the roof guiding its vision and navigation system. Martin Marietta, which merged with Lockheed Martin in 1995 to become Lockheed Martin, won the bid in the summer of 1984 to create the experimental ALV. They would get $10.6 million in the 3.5 years of the program. And that's about $24 million today, with an optional $6 million after that if the project met certain benchmarks. The October 1985 issue of Popular Science included a story about the tests that were being conducted at a secret Martin Marietta facility southwest of Denver. And there's a description from that article. The boxy blue and white vehicle crawls sedately along a narrow Colorado Valley road, never venturing far from the center line. A single window, set cyclops-like in the vehicle's slab face, gives no clue about the driver. The tentative trek looks out of character for the massive 10-foot-tall, 8-wheeled vehicle. Although 3 onboard diesel engines roar, the wheels creep along at 3 miles per hour. After about a half mile, the hulking vehicle stops, but nobody climbs out. There is no one on board, just a computer. Using laser and video for eyes, a seminal yet still advanced AI program has sent the vehicle down the road without human intervention. DARPA paired Martin Marietta with the University of Maryland, whose earlier work in vision systems was seen as instrumental to make the autonomous vehicle portion of the program a success. As it turns out, creating a vision system for an autonomous vehicle is incredibly difficult. The system was fooled by light and shadows and thus couldn't work with any degree of consistency. It might be able to detect the edge of the road at noon just fine, only to be thrown off by the shadows cast during the early evening. So this didn't work out very well. But it is perhaps a foreshadowing of driverless cars that are being developed by a lot of people today. Toyota, Ford, who said they weren't working on one, but oh wow, now they have a driverless car, or of course Google. In the end, it couldn't overcome its battle unreadiness. As Alex Rowland notes in the book Strategic Computing, one officer who completely misunderstood the concept of the ALV program complained that the vehicle was militarily useless, huge, slow, and painted white. It would be too easy a target on the battlefield. So anyway, the next would be, here's the next piece of tech that they were developing for this, and this one is reminiscent of R2-D2. Another application envisioned early on in the development of the SCI was the pilot's associate. It was imagined as a sort of invisible R2-D2, a smart companion seen, you can check out the pictures for some promo stuff, that understood plain language delivered by the pilot. The associate might spot a potential target, for instance, and ask the pilot if it should engage. It's Top Gun meets Siri. The pilot would still make the final decisions in the scenario, but the pilot's associate was going to be smart enough not only to know who, what, and how to ask questions, it also understood why. This is from the document. Pilots in combat are regularly overwhelmed by the quantity of incoming data and communications on which they must base their life or death decisions. They can be equally overwhelmed by the dozens of switches, buttons, and knobs that cover their control handles demanding precise activation. While each of the aircraft's hundreds of components serve legitimate purposes, the technologies which created them have far outpaced our skill at intelligently interfacing the pilot with them. It's here that we see DARPA's case emerging for needing a Skynet of its own. The overwhelming nature of combat, overwhelming DARPA implies, only because battlefield technology had already advanced so quickly, could only be achieved with new machines. The pilot may still be the one pushing the buttons, but these computers would do at least half the thinking for him. When mankind can't keep up, hand it off to a machine. The pilot's associate application never got the same exposure in the American press that the ALV did, probably because it was harder to visualize than an enormous driverless tank rolling down the road. But looking at the speech recognition tech of today, it's easy to see where all that research into a pilot's associate ended up. And then we have the Invisible Robot Advisor. The Battle Management System, which is what it's called, was the third of the 3 applications originally planned to prove that SCI was a practical endeavor. From the book about strategic computing. In the Naval Battle Management System envisioned for SC, the expert system would make inferences about enemy and own force order of battle, which explicitly include uncertainty, generate strike options, carry out simulations for evaluating these options, generate the operations plan, and produce explanations. What does that mean? The battle management system was essentially the brain of the entire operation, and for that reason it was kept out of the spotlight more so than grunts like the ALV. Robots rolling down the road without human control is terrifying enough for some people. Invisible robots with their invisible finger on the very real nuclear button? You don't exactly send press releases out for that one. The battle management system was devised as an application specifically for the Navy, just as the ALV had been designed for the Army and the pilot's associate for the Air Force, but it was really just a showcase for the broader system. Every one of these technologies was intended to eventually be used wherever it was most needed. The voice recognition software developed for the pilot's associate would need to work for every branch of the military, not just the Air Force, and the battle management system would have to play nice with everyone, except the enemy target, of course. All the various components of the SCI were part of a larger hypothetical system that could have radically changed the nature of war in the 21st century. Imagine a global wireless network overseeing various sub-networks within the U.S. military. Imagine armies of robot tanks on the ground talking to fleets of drones in the sky and unmanned submarines in the sea, all coordinating their activities faster than any human commander ever could. Now imagine it all being much more complicated, with nukes waiting to be deployed in space. The vision for the SCI was incredibly bold and yet somehow quaint when we look at just how far it could have gone. The logical extensions of strong AI and a global network of killing machines are not hard to envision, even if only because we've seen them played out in fiction countless times. What finally killed the SCI in the early 90s was the acceptance, after nearly a decade of trying, that strong artificial intelligence on the level DARPA had imagined was simply unattainable. But if all of these various technologies developed in the 1980s sound eerily familiar, it's probably because they're all making headlines here in the early 21st century. We see the vision systems that were imagined for ALV emerging in robots like Boston Dynamics Atlas. We see the pilot associate Siri-like understanding of speech being utilized by the U.S. Air Force, and we see autonomous vehicles being tested by Google among a host of other companies. They're all the future of war. And if companies like Google are to believe, they'll be the future of peace as well. Now, this is interesting. This is, I'll read a little bit more here. Google's recent purchase of Boston Dynamics, which made the robot we just talked about, has raised quite a few eyebrows among those concerned about a future filled with autonomous robot armies. Google says that Boston Dynamics will honor old contracts with military clients, though they'll no longer accept any new ones. But whether or not they continue to accept military contracts, and it's certainly possible that they could do so under the radar within a secretive black budget, there's no question that the line between military and civilian technology has always been blurred. If Boston Dynamics never again works for organizations like DARPA, and yet Google benefits from research paid for by the military, then ostensibly the system worked. The military got what it needed by advancing the science of robotics with a private company, and now lessons from that military tech will show up in our everyday civilian lives, just like countless other technologies, including the internet itself. In truth, this post barely scratches the surface of DARPA's aspirations for SCI, but hopefully by continuing to explore yesterday's visions of the future, we can gain some historical perspective. Again, that's important. We can gain some historical perspective to better appreciate what these new advancements, that these new advancements don't emerge out of thin air. They're not even that new. They're the product of decades of research and billions of dollars being spent by hundreds of organizations, both public and private. Ultimately, strategic computing wasn't derailed by some fear of what creating such a program would do to our world. The technology to build it, from the advanced AI to the autonomous vehicles, simply wasn't evolving fast enough. But here we are, 2 decades after SCI faded away, 2 decades further into the development of this vision for smart machines. Our future of super smart, interconnected robots is nearly here. You don't have to like it, but you can't say you weren't warned. Okay, now, incredible article. Great article, great write-up, a lot of information to take in there. Please go to the show notes and read it for yourself, reread it, go to some of the links and find out about that stuff. What does it all mean? It's true that, and I've said it on this show many times, that, okay, the internet was created by the military, is created by the government. We have to deal with that. Okay, only, the only hope that comes out of a lot of this stuff, all right, because, you envision, you read about the SCI and you just go, wow, just imagine what they can do. But that's the thing, is that a lot of these guys in the government, and this article illustrated the fact many times, that the military just didn't even understand what they were being offered or what could be designed. So while DARPA may have some brains there, the government and a lot of the military doesn't really have the brains to know what to do with this stuff. And that's a double-edged sword. That's a good and a bad thing, okay? Because you don't want dumb people launching nukes or having control of nukes, okay? But at the same time, it's good that they can't figure out more efficient and better ways of killing people. The internet, I know I've heard people say this, that the government knew exactly what they were doing with the internet, and they knew they had to give it out, to the people. I don't believe that. At least I don't believe that the government at large had that kind of foresight. But it is a fact, and it proves a point that, private industry, individuals are the only people that can really figure out, the market, whatever you want to call it, choose your terms, okay? Are the people that know how to apply this stuff. Okay, drones are a terrible thing, except for when Amazon uses it to bring a delivery to your door on Sunday, right? And so it's an interesting point that all these technologies, as terrifying as they are, and when we look back on history, okay, and we read about it, just how terrifying they are, we also always have to consider, how can this be used for peace? How can we turn this around? And we need to keep that in mind. We really do, because I know all this stuff sounds so scary, and I agree. It worries me too. There's times where I think with drones, with the drones that get used, sometimes I think they just have a human at the helm, just to keep people from freaking out. From the idea that a general can just like just like you talk into Google Now on your phone, and Google Now pretty well understands what you're doing or what you want, and it displays it. I think some people just feel a little bit better that there's a human holding the joystick, as much as that may not be necessary anymore, and it probably isn't. Okay. But we need to understand these technologies. We need to understand where they came from. We need to consider that, hey, and look, ever since in our post-Prism world, okay, that's the new adage, right? Ever since our post-Prism world, we have to contemplate that a lot of these conspiracy theories that we used to just toss out of hand, we shouldn't be tossing them out of hand anymore. So for someone to say, hey, look, this Google collecting all this information, with Siri and like all this technology getting better at understanding speech patterns, and by releasing it out to the public so that they can put it out in the market so that it can develop faster, because it can't be developed well enough in a lab at a government facility. Is this all designed just to make better killing machines? Maybe. Maybe it is. That's something we have to consider. But this is where Carl Sagan's words come in, is that technology isn't just for the geeks. Science and technology isn't just for the brains. science and technology in our world today, which relies on it, which is built upon all of that, is built upon, the theories of science and the facts of science and, and so much technology. We have to understand all this stuff, and we need to know the history of it too, to know where its future might be. And that was the point of this whole article, and I thought that was fantastic. That was very, very important, to get out there. I can't stress it enough. And now, again, they admitted that, hey, the AI wasn't there. The artificial intelligence just wasn't there for this to really work. Was the Terminator movies like what did the first Terminator movie come out in? 85, 84, or 85, maybe earlier? Was that made in direct response, to SCI? To the Strategic Computing Initiative? No, I don't think so. In fact, a lot of people say that of course, the Terminator film was actually copied from a Harlan Ellison story. In fact, in the credits for the first Terminator movie, it says, thank you to Harlan Ellison, or inspired by Harlan Ellison. It says something to that effect. And, I understand there's a lot of people who, again, I got to hit this point home, is that there's a lot of people who think about like that kind of Terminator future where technology is just so crazy that it's going to end up killing everybody. No, you got to grasp that all of that can also be used for very peaceful, very human forwarding, human advancing, abilities, technologies. And those are just as important to look into. But the reason where that fear comes from, that it's all designed to kill us or all designed to control us, it comes from a lack of understanding of the technology itself. And if we can just, and we got to foster that, we have to foster that understanding. Okay. There can be, really, I don't have to, sovereign tech doesn't have to be the only liberty, anarchist run, science and tech show out there. There can be more. I think there needs to be more. I think it needs to be talked about a lot because, again, it is the very foundation of our society, in how it runs and how it operates. Obviously, if someone said to me, well, the foundation of our society is social mores, and unfortunately a lot of those are very conservative, fine, yes, of course I would agree with that too. Okay, but the foundation, what makes the world go round and round, is technology. And of course, science. Science is life. So this stuff has to be understood. Okay. And we got to get the word out. All right. I don't think paying attention to politics, there's some importance to that, but paying attention to the tech world, incredibly important. There's some people who said, don't teach your kid a second language, teach them coding. Absolutely. If we're bringing up this next generation of people, that are going to create a peaceful world, then if that's how it's going to be, please, let's make sure they have as much an understanding of technology as they do of morality, philosophy, and all this other stuff. Please. It is so important, because otherwise they could get duped into accepting a future where the government has machines like we just talked about. Incredibly efficient killing machines. No one wants that. I'll be back with more. This is Sovereign Tech.
Time now for 90 Seconds on Sex with Dr. Paul.
In case you woke up this morning wondering, how much do women's breasts weigh? Well, the answer is approximately 1/2 pound for each cup size. So if a woman has a B cup, each breast will weigh 1 pound. For a C cup, it's 1.5 pounds, and for a D cup, the breast will weigh close to 2 pounds. So most women's breasts weigh between 2 and 4 pounds total. The breasts of younger women are primarily made up of glands and not much fat. That's why they tend to be so firm. As women get older, the breast lobes or glands are replaced by more and more fat, and so the breasts become softer. A woman's hormones influence almost every aspect of her breasts, especially the glands inside of them, and this is why it's perfectly normal for a woman's breasts to change in consistency and sensitivity from week to week. More than 90% of women have breasts that are asymmetrical, and this means that one breast is different from the other in size, shape, or position on the woman's chest. Now, it's usually the left breast that's the larger of the two, and in almost 25% of women, The larger breast is at least 1 cup size bigger than the other. Now, over the course of a woman's lifetime, her breast size will change up to 6 or 7 times.
For more, visit 90secondsonsex.com.
Software of the Week.
It is time for Software of the Week, where I cover software that I find interesting or useful. And this week, I want to, we're coming off of the triple load. It actually almost became like a quadruple load. I know. What the hell's that? Where, because I went off to Las Vegas, went off to Sin City that wasn't so sinful. And so I made sure there was plenty of Sovryn tech for you to have while I was away. And I did the Dark Android special, which I've gotten a lot of great feedback about, and I really, really appreciate that. And I asked some questions in it because there were some apps, there were some things. The point of the Dark Android special was to come up with Google replacements, replacements for Google services that work on Android and that are generally open source if possible, and that don't require necessarily the Play Store maybe or things like that. Anyway, one of the big problems was the map software. I mentioned Scobler. But there are other alternatives, and I want to talk about them right now. And maybe, at some point, if some Sovryn Tech listeners, if they really want to test this out, test each one and let me know. I admittedly, I don't have the time to test every single one. I can try them out a little bit to make sure they're not too buggy. But as far as like real world testing of them, I would love to hear it. And because I haven't yet seen the Lifehacker article that compares these things. So again, if you want to get rid of Google Maps because you're so concerned about what Google Maps would do, because perhaps it's being used for a new implementation of the Strategic Computing Initiative that we were talking about in the last segment, hey, I'm open to that, okay? I'll admit it. Call it conspiracy if you want, but you would have said Prism was too. Anyway, what we have are two options here, and they both use, which is what's important, what I want a map app to use is the OpenStreetMaps data. Okay, I want them to use OSM, which is an open source, mapping system essentially as their back end. And both of these do that. One of them is Map Factor GPS navigation. So, and the links are in the show notes for you to check these out in the Play Store. But bear in mind, you can always go to like Pirate Bay and just download the API. And if you have like a rooted Android, and maybe if you're running CyanogenMod, you can sort of tweak around with that. So maybe you don't need the Play Store at all to do a lot of this stuff. But anyway, this does work offline. It has a nice, sexy British voice, female voice on it, although I'm sure that can be changed. It has traffic turns, I think. I mean, this really looks full-featured, and actually the style of it, I thought when I was using it, looked a lot cleaner than Scobler. It also has, I do believe it has offline capability. So, and the other one I want to mention is OSM and. It's called OSM and. Now, the OSM obviously means OpenStreetMaps. So it's OSM and maps and navigation. And this is really, again, not as much polish, I thought, as Map Factor or even as Scobler, but it does work really, really well. And it does also work offline. I initially thought it didn't work offline. Then I found the offline setting on it, and it worked really well. It has turn-by-turn guidance. It pretty much has everything. As far as features, I thought it was the most feature-rich of the bunch. Not as good as Scobler. I still think Scobler takes the cake on all three, but you have to pay for Scobler as to where these two are free. Map Factor and OSM and. So, if you're looking for that free option, I mean, don't hesitate to check these out. I thought that all three of them, Scobler, Map Factor, and OSM and, the little bit that I tested them, I thought they all worked really, really well. OSM and was definitely like super feature rich. I was very, very pleased with how well that worked. So, check that one out if you want. Again, the links are in the show notes. And that's it's a funny thing. Yeah, Google Maps is cool, but Google Maps can't find my house, and Apple Maps can. In fact, this was interesting data that came out. Speaking of map software, apparently only like 10% of iOS users went to Google Maps when it was re-released under, iOS 6, because they had removed Google Maps from iOS 5. And most people just stuck with Apple Maps, and Apple Maps is getting better. There's, that's fine. I know the jokes about Apple Maps, but I thought Scott Forstall, in the amount of time that he had to develop that, did a great job. So Google Maps is not the only one out there, and I don't, and please, Waze is part of Google Maps. So, if you're trying to stay away from Google, going to Waze isn't going to help you. But I think these alternatives are perfectly solid. They work very, very well. OSM, and I'm feeling right now, like I said, it is kind of the most feature rich. Scobler, has plenty of features and works offline really, really, really well. And Scobler, covers a whole bunch of countries. So there's a lot there. So it's a pick and choose. Take a look at the features, see which one you want. Again, I think the winner right now for me is still Scobler as far as overall operation. But if you want to, if you don't want to pay the buck for it and pay the money for the other maps, check out OSM or Map Factory. Maybe one you'll like better. I'll be back with more. This is Sovryn. Are you tired of people wasting away all their precious time? Then stop using the same social media as them. Google Plus is a centralized hub for all of your Google services, your ideas, and your passions. Google Plus has a much more international user base, as to where other forms of social media center around so-called developed nations that really don't do anything exciting in the first place. Google Plus has almost no spam and has very few cat pictures, pictures of police, or anything else government-related. Stop using Facebook. You have an alternative. Start using Google Plus today. It is time for listener emails, where I cover questions that get sent to me. Sometimes it's almost like a tech roulette where I'm responding to articles that are sent to me. I have tons of questions to get to. But please do not stop sending them. And you can send them via Twitter. You can direct message me on Twitter. That's fine. You can, even if you find me on Google Plus, you can send it to me on Google Plus. Yes, I do have a Google Plus account because for the gaming interests of mine, I don't have a choice. So anyway, you can send it there really if you want to. I try not to use Facebook so much now, but I still end up using it quite a bit, but you can find me on there too if you want. Also, of course, the most important is the email address, which is sovryntech@riseup.net. Okay, you can send email to me there, but I added into the show notes. Okay, I want you to be aware of this. I added into the show notes two things. One I added in is that I did start an IRC channel for the show. It's called the Sovryn Balnea. Okay, and it's on Freenode. You can find that information in the show notes. Also, I put my PGP key, my GPG key essentially, in the show notes. So if you see a bunch of funny looking data at the bottom of the show notes, that's my PGP key that you can copy and paste, and enter into Mailvelope or Cleopatra, whatever you use to control your encrypted emails. Okay. But that, I have to tell you, that is not for sovryntech@riseup.net. That is for Brian@freetalklive.com. Okay. So if it is so important, okay, for the email to be encrypted, and that's fine if you prefer to talk that way. You can email me, Brian@freetalklive.com, and that's my PGP key. Okay. The instructions are in the show notes, so that way there's no confusion and people aren't trying to send there. But if you're wondering why I don't have a PGP key set up for sovryntech@riseup.net, I'll just say this: it's an alias. So anyway. And I kind of want it to be open to a small degree. But if it's really something that crazy and you want to get in touch with me, you can grab the public key from the show notes for Brian@freetalklive.com. Okay, so all those options are out there for you. Don't hesitate to contact me. About anything. Actually, if you have anything you want to advertise as well, do email me at Brian@freetalklive.com, because I am the ad exec for Free Talk Live, and I'd love to work out an ad package with you. So now that that's out of the way, someone sent this was sent to me on Facebook, but someone asked me a question. There was an article where a actress was kind of railing out. And this actress considered herself a feminist, and she was kind of railing out against like Britney Spears, or really more Miley Cyrus, doing just all these crazy pictures and all these crazy videos where she's just doing these, what are popularly conceived as these very hypersexual hypersexualized, poses or actions or, whatever. And now, I have often described myself as a feminist, and I have been for, most of my life. It's a term I'm starting to just not want to use anymore, because what's happening is, to some degree, is that it just creates this crazy emotional reaction in people that is mind-boggling to me, to say the least. Because the reaction that they get isn't even as strong as the reaction as they get when they hear statist. And so I don't know what exactly is going on in these people's heads where they just hate the word. I understand the popular feminists in the Democrat Party or whatever. But feminism really is just about gender equality. Yes, I understand there are feminists who are all like, oh, men cannot penetrate me. Do not penetrate me. That's ownership. That's control. That's the patriarchy, all this stuff. No, I mean, I'm not a feminist like that, obviously, because I love sex. Love sex. So, I am contemplating just not really describing myself as a feminist anymore. But anyway, besides that, so the person, was saying, look, maybe this actress that we were talking about was saying, hey, maybe, you other women should kind of tone it down a little bit and calm down. And she got accused of slut shaming, which slut shaming is a genuinely terrible thing, a terrible, terrible thing. I mean, and the idea is that just because a woman is expressing herself sexually, that she's a slut and that she's asking for it and all this stuff. And so that's what slut shaming is. And that is a real thing that society is really putting out there as, that's what you do. So, it's a genuine problem. Okay. But, this actress, she's like, look, I'm a feminist. I'm not slut shaming. I'm just saying really isn't this too much? Isn't this kind of crazy or whatever? Now, my feelings on it are this. Okay. I'll discuss this. I don't think that it's too much. Okay. Because part of the complaint is the clothes she was, that Miley Cyrus wears or that Britney Spears wears or that these people wear. I don't like clothing at all. Yes. I know that in the winter, if you don't wear clothing, you're cold. Wow. Do you have any ideas how many, let me tell you, okay, the lack of understanding that people have, and maybe this is just some kind of libertarian, I don't know, it's just some meme with libertarians where they just have to be so goddamn hyper literal. Okay. But let me tell you, when I say that I think clothing is pointless, do you really think me, Brian Sovryn, the golden stallion of the tech world, okay, a guy that I hope you at least think is mildly intelligent, do you really think that I don't consider the fact that when you walk outside in New Hampshire in the middle of winter naked, that you're going to freeze? Do you really think I don't know that? Even if I'm on the radio, okay? Do you really think a guy that has a radio show doesn't realize, if I'm on Free Talk Live and a caller calls in, you think I don't realize that if I go outside that I'm going to freeze my ass off and maybe, who knows, maybe even die or something? Come on. So anyway, I don't believe in clothing. Okay. Do we understand that? Yes, I know where its purpose is inside of winter. Do we get that? Okay, good. And my point being is what purpose does it serve? I mean, in fact, especially today, you think about things like you take on a pair of jeans. I wear jeans. Okay. And you have that, that fifth pocket and you have that little pocket. Do you know what that's for? Nope. You're wrong. It's not for a comb. You're dead wrong. That's for a pocket watch. Who wears a pocket watch? I'm the only person I know that actually even wears a watch. I have a nice calculator watch that I wear. Who wears a pocket watch? That's so out of fashion. Okay, if you're into steampunk, fine, you wear a pocket watch. Woohoo. Wow, you just proved me wrong. Stop that. Okay, stop that. You know what I mean. The average person does not wear a pocket watch. To wear jeans would require a pocket for that. Okay, so clothing, even clothing we have today, is completely outdated. and purposeless. What's the point to, like lapels to the collar and all this stuff? What's the point to a tie? All these things were meant to keep you warm. No one spends that much time outside in the winter to where they need to be concerned about being kept warm. And in fact, if they did, they're not wearing ties. They're wearing, like some North Face, jacket that's like really well designed, to somehow insulate you, or it's like Columbia with their Omni Shield technology that keeps you, cool in the summer and warm in the winter or whatever. Okay, so, and thankfully for those advancements in clothing at least, but that's my point, is that's like so many things that we wear as far as clothing, their purposes are so long outdated that there's no point. And what's the point to clothing in the first place? It's shame, right? Like, now, maybe the first clothing, yes, was to keep warm or something to that effect. But today, I think it goes without saying that clothing is about, status and shame. And who wants that? What compassionate person is interested in those things? What anarchist is interested in status and shame? Well, I take that back. There's a lot of anarchists that are interested in shaming people, unfortunately. So again, the whole clothing argument is just dumb because clothing should go away. As far as the sexy moves, yeah, that's ridiculous. I love these sexy moves that Miley Cyrus would make, like in her video for Wrecking Ball or something. And like, okay, was the sledgehammer representative of a penis? Sure, why not? It's a reference to, her whole album, Bangers, which is her new album that song is on, has a total 80s style and theme to it. So obviously she's referencing Peter Gabriel's classic Sledgehammer, the song Sledgehammer, which is about his penis. The music video opens up with a shot of sperm. Which, by the way, to say that music is somehow now hypersexualized and it wasn't back then, bullshit. Okay. Music's always been sexualized. Always. Like even jazz is the sexiest stuff on the planet. But anyway, my point being is that, okay, sure, is that stuff kind of ridiculous? Yes. In fact, I love these websites where they take men and they have them in like these pinup poses. Oh boy, I just got a message or something. I don't know if you heard that. Anyway, no. I love these websites where like it shows guys like with their legs in some kind of sexy pose or something, and it just looks ridiculous, right? Because it's a man doing it. So I agree on that. Like that's nonsense. So my point is this, is that because before I've really, I know I've come out and said that I love how pop culture, which is what this actress was complaining about, how, pop culture is sexualizing everything. I love how it's breaking down the walls of social conservatism. Okay. I really, really do. But you know what? At the end of the day, I have to realize this. Is that all of, right, porn and pop culture, all this stuff, it's doing these things. It's doing this sexy stuff. It's breaking down social conservatism or railing against social conservatism, not from a principled standpoint. It's railing against it to make money. Nothing wrong with making money, okay? I understand that. But I have to be honest with myself in that, all of these things that are out there, they're not really, they're not breaking the social norms to somehow make new social norms or to eliminate social norms in general. They're just doing it because it's rebellious and it makes a buck. And so with that in mind, I don't support it. I still listen, to some of the music and find some of this stuff to be pretty sexy. And there's something, if a woman wants to express her sexuality, that's great. I'm not going to slut shame at all. Okay. But I'm looking for the principles. Why am I doing this? I'm doing this because I'm a woman and I'm free. If that's the attitude that they're having, awesome. But if the attitude is I'm doing this for dollar signs, you lost me. I have no interest in that. Or I'm doing this because some suit, on the 30th floor in LA says this is what'll make for a good record. Lost me. Not interested. Something I like to do on this show, I like to think I do on this show, is I cut through the bullshit. You know, I get to the core. You know, that's the old anarchist line, right? Strike the root. You know, let's get right down to it. Well, getting right down to it, all this pop culture stuff is pushing a farce. You know, it's not interested in advancing, women's plight or the human condition. It's just interested, you know, in taking money with stuff that really a lot of times sucks. You know, like that's not even entertaining. So, you know, I mean, maybe if someone wants to consider that I'm taking a bit of a 180 on this, that's fine. If you feel that way, you know, I'm open to that. So, because it was up until pretty recently that I, you know, came to the conclusion that, you know, this pop culture, you know, and all the sex being shown off in pop culture and porn, a lot of it, it's just to sell. It's not to actually forward, you know, the ideas of even feminism, you know, or of liberty in general, or of anarchy in general. It's not for that. And that's a shame. That's really unfortunate, because a lot of these people have the opportunity to do that. There's that actress from The Hunger Games, which everybody kind of like, it seems like a lot of anarchists and libertarians like to quote, because she's always, you know, calling out all these you know, crazy things, like saying, you know, that calling people fat is terrible and all this stuff. And yeah, and you know, I agree. So at least someone out there is being somewhat real, even though sometimes you can tell she's like hamming it up and acting. But you know, I can understand what some of these women are saying, and it's a very, very real message. And I don't think they're slut shaming by any means. I think they're just saying, like, look, we're not moving, you know, forward at all with this. It's like, you're just doing this for, you know, to not even to make them rich. It's to make the person upstairs rich more. You know what I mean? So, you know, that's my thoughts on it. And believe me, I want social conservatism to go, you know, and I'm all for, you know, women acting sexy, men acting sexy, and all that stuff. I think that's a very, very good thing. And, you know, and I want there to you know, to be more of that. But let's do it real. You know, let's be real about it. And in fact, I mean, because like, really, if these people were that principled, you know, like they really cared that much about forwarding, you know, saying, you know, I'm a free woman and I can do this. I mean, quite frankly, don't you think they would just like say, you know, screw clothes altogether? You know, like why hold back? Why even cover the nipples, you know? And just, I mean, so these people are just, you know, again, they're just doing what they're told. I'm not saying they're being mind controlled or handled or something like that. I'm just saying that they're only doing what they're told. And that's unfortunate, but I'm glad, you know, I had, there was a listener who she sent me, you know, this article, and it really kind of brought it to light for me that it's all a sham, that like this thing that I love how they're, you know, railing against Christianity. And I love railing against Christianity, fundamentalist Christianity. I know there's so many different types of Christianity. Okay. I know there's so many different types of Christianity. You got me? You know, but let's do it from a principled perspective, and it's not there. But anyway, but also, yeah, you know, I'm seriously reconsidering ever using the word feminism again. I had it in like my description on Twitter. I got rid of that. You know, I got rid of it there, because it's so lightning rod, and I'm you know, I'm not interested in that. I don't know what other word to use. I'm still trying to think of that other word to describe half of how I feel. You know, anarchist works great because it says non-hierarchy, so that clearly says you know, you can't own a woman, which is part of the reason I enjoy feminism. Anyway, if you've got thoughts on what I just said, please email me, sourtechhorizon.net. I'll be back with more.
The Electronic Frontier Foundation, or EFF, fights to protect your rights in the digital world. When a patent troll threatened podcasters, they fought back. EFF has also defended your right to encryption and has sued the NSA to end the government's mass, suspicionless surveillance. There are different ways you can help EFF, from donations to signing petitions to writing your representatives to just spreading the word. Find out more at EFF.org. That's EFF.org.
Brian! Stop playing those video games!
Just a minute, Mom.
Game Talk.
It is time for Game Talk, where we talk video games, and boy, this is this is pretty interesting because when worlds collide, this might as well be hacker stories for this one, but no, this is Game Talk, and this is an unbelievable story. When it got shared to me, I could not believe, that this was so. I mean, yes, it's believable, okay, but it's just it's so hard to grasp that tax dollars in the United States are actually going towards this. And I'm actually reading from Gawker here, and it's the NSA and CIA agents infiltrated World of Warcraft and other online games. And I know what you're saying. What the fuck? Infiltrated them for what? Ostensibly concerned that terrorists would disguise themselves as gamers in order to secretly communicate, agents from the NSA, CIA, Pentagon, and Britain's GCHQ have posed undercover in online realms like World of Warcraft, Second Life, and Xbox Live. In fact, the practice grew so popular with the spy agencies, I'm sure it was popular, that a deconfliction group was established to prevent the agents from inadvertently spying on or trying to recruit each other. Our country's best and brightest began disguising themselves as digital trolls, elves. Boy, if there were ever a troll, trolls, elves, and supermodels in 2008 after a top secret NSA documents provided by Edward Snowden and published by the New York Times and ProPublica described the games as a target-rich communication network that lets terrorists and other criminals hide in plain sight. Despite offering evidence that certain targets played online games, the program did not, according to the NSA document, achieve any actual counterterrorism successes, perhaps because such games would make a terrible place to exchange secret information. From the New York Times, games are built and operated by companies looking to make money, so the player's identity and activity is tracked, said Peter W. Singer of the Brookings Institution. For terror groups looking to keep their communications secret, there are far more effective and easier ways to do so than putting on a troll avatar. Even if there was no value gained from monitoring terrorist suspects, intelligence agencies soon identified another potential boon from the practice: the recruitment of double agents. According to the NSA documents, Britain's GCHQ discovered that engineers, embassy employees, and foreign intelligence agents were playing World of Warcraft, though it's unclear if any agents were recruited through the game. The business of spying in online games generated millions for the private sector. After a conference discussing the perceived threat in 2009, two private companies, SAIC and Lockheed Martin, received multi-billion-dollar government contracts to study the links between a person's online persona and their real-life behavior, though those studies have proved ineffective, providing seemingly obvious information like younger players and male players preferring competitive hack-and-slash activities, and older and female players preferring non-combat activities. I mean, because you couldn't figure that out on your own. While executives from World of Warcraft's parent company, Blizzard Entertainment, have denied any knowledge of the spying in 2007, Corey Onderkov, the CTO for Linden Lab, the company that produces Second Life, gave a presentation to NSA officials which advertised that it would allow the government to understand the motivation, context, and consequent behaviors of non-Americans through observation without leaving U.S. soil. Onderkov participation makes sense. Prior to Linden, he was a Navy officer who worked at the NSA with top-secret clearance. But luckily for gamers, he no longer works at Linden. The former NSA agent's current job? Director of Mobile Engineering at Facebook. Oh, awesome. He works for Facebook. Nothing to worry about there. The New York Times report comes just 2 days after the Washington Post revealed that, for years now, the FBI has been able to activate a computer's camera without triggering the light that lets users know it is recording, which is what we talked about 2 episodes ago in episode 51. The NSA documents on online games and virtual worlds are embedded below. So anyway, you can look into those, read them for yourselves. That's kind of the nice thing, is that there is some degree of transparency going on here. Insanity. And I'm sure, like the article says, that it was a very, very popular form of, a form of spying, form of, a very popular work for the NSA. and whoever else. The Pentagon, CIA, I'm sure is very, very popular. Why not? You get to play video games while you're at work, and you get to say you're doing it for national security. And what are, how could this even work? I know some people ask that, like, how could this work? Say they could even find people, say there were terrorists that were using this, to communicate between each other. How could you figure that out? You could kind of like stand close, I guess, and you could read the word bubbles somewhat like in World of Warcraft. You wouldn't necessarily hear anybody talking. This is just, it's the worst possible spying you could possibly do. And it was totally ineffective. They didn't find anybody. And then there's like, oh, well, we can recruit double agents doing this. And it just seems so unreal, that they'd even consider this to be useful. And, this is really like perhaps the great hope behind all this encryption technology, behind all the technologies we talked about earlier in this show that DARPA was developing, is that these people they don't get it. They don't get the human condition. They don't understand markets. They don't understand, really, they don't. And in fact, that's something a lot of people say is like, yeah, they're trying to control the psychology of human beings. They clearly know nothing about the psychology of human beings. These people are, quite frankly, stupid. That's it. They're stupid. It was like Peter Singer said, there's so much cheaper and better ways to communicate than going through a gaming, through a gaming world. And just like picture that. Like World of Warcraft. These are huge, massive worlds that you go to online. How are you possibly? You'd have to send so many people, and maybe they sent so many people. But what a waste. Well, no, actually, I take that back. If those were the same people that may have been somehow, perhaps they were playing World of Warcraft instead of, controlling drones or going overseas and killing people, good. I'm glad they were playing World of Warcraft. I'm more than happy about that. But all these, for the stated purposes of these organizations like the NSA, CIA, GCHQ, what a waste of, manpower. So that's the thing. These people are goofs, and that's, they have no clear plan. Okay. Everything just, that's why there's so many laws, right? Like if there was this clear plan, right, to take over the world, to create a global government, if they were so damned intelligent and bright, whoever they being the powers that be, whatever, if they were so smart, they would have put all the words in it in the first place, to set up for it. Or they would have made laws that they didn't have to repeal or not repeal, where they didn't have to like adjust them later. They'd lay out the law that would somehow, insidiously allow for some kind of growth or whatever later. Now you can say, yes, okay, the Constitution, like Lysander Spooner said, right? The Constitution was either allowed for the government that we have to exist, or it was just, it was powerless to prevent it, and thus it's worthless. Sure, fine, but all that was just done through like Supreme Court saying, no, we reinterpret this, we reinterpret that. Again, there is no, I don't believe it. I don't think that there's like this really grand scheme that is so well worked out to the minutest detail that it's just going to unfold one day. I think these people are generally goofs, and and they just try to have fun at work every once in a while. And so again, take comfort in that they're not that bright, we'll get into, in Hacker Stories on this episode, we'll get into some of the scary things that they may be doing, because, okay, fine, while they're not that bright, computers may be able to actually compile information better. And in fact, that's kind of a hopeful thing too. That's a good point to bring up, is that while Linden Labs, they may have explicitly worked with the NSA inside of Second Life, there is some degree of evidence for that. Like if Activision was like really aware that the NSA was doing this, like they could have just set up bots to just listen to every every kind of communication out there. They wouldn't have had to actually send in agents, to look for this stuff. So I don't think the gaming companies are necessarily working with, with the NSA or with GCHQ or whoever, because there would have been so much simpler ways to do this. There would have been things you could have just put in the code. And how do you know that they didn't? Okay, I don't know that they didn't. I don't. But I'm guessing they didn't because they felt the desire to do this popular form of work, this popular form of surveillance. Where they're actually literally playing the game. So, but hey, maybe that's what happened. Maybe they stopped the program just because, well, now we've got we have our bots inside each of these games that keep an eye out for this sort of thing. But I mean, like, why even bother? If they're not looking for terrorists, because that's what some people say. It's like, well, they're not using it for terrorists. They're using it to watch us. What are they going to find out on World of Warcraft about anybody? Like, it's the dumbest. I mean, it's intrusive. I feel like it's intrusive. What does the government, the government doesn't have any business being there, but in the same time, what are they going to see there that's so freaking interesting? Nothing. I mean, I played World of Warcraft for a little while and then I thought better of it. And I was like, well, no, I want to have a life. Unless like you're one of those guys that's making money off of doing it, good for you. But like, there's just, everything is positively mundane that goes on, in World of Warcraft. So I have no clue, what they were thinking. But I guess it is just a comfort that these guys have really, really bad ideas a lot of times. So we'll be back with more. This is Sovryn Tech.
Not sure what to get for that special person in your life this holiday season? Look no further. Savory Scents Candles has something for you. Savory Scents aims to please with quality products and service. They even accommodate your special requests. Visit SavoryScentsCandles.com and be sure to check out the exclusive subscription boxes. That's SavoryScentsCandles.com. For 10% off regular orders, use coupon code FTL. Wow! Oh. It's a website of the week.
It is time for Website of the Week, where I talk about websites that I find interesting or useful. And, sometimes these websites will, kind of conflate with being software as well, as everything sort of becomes a cloud service, which a lot of things are really going towards. It's hard to differentiate, you know what I mean? And maybe at some point I'll change my rules to where I'll say, look, if the website is actually somehow a cloud service, that I won't do it as Website of the Week. I'm open to maybe making that rule, because the website for this week I think is incredible, really awesome stuff. But it is essentially software. It's an emulator. The website is an emulator, and it's an emulator for an incredibly powerful machine in history, that being the Amiga 500 emulator. Now, the actual website, the web address for the website, you're going to want to grab it from the show notes, because it's pnacl-amiga-emulator.appspot.com. So I don't expect you to be able to type that out for me saying it. So grab it from the show notes, but it is exactly what it says it is. It is an emulator, a cloud-based emulator for the Amiga 500, and you can set up disk drives, you can set up all this other, wild stuff, and it does a pretty good job. I mean, it's still kind of a beta, kind of a demo, but it does its business, and it gives you some degree of instructions, though, of course, if you used an Amiga 500, years ago, they were popular. The late 80s was when the Amiga 500 really came out, and it was a big deal. I mean, it was kind of the continuation of the, of the Commodore line. It was sort of in response to some degree to the Commodore 64, because the Commodore 64 was like the computer for everybody. And the Amiga 500 was saying, look, we're going to get down and dirty with computers again. This is a real computer. And it was a real computer. I mean, a whopping 7 megahertz, I think, if I remember right. It was like a 7 megahertz processor. which real, in all seriousness at the time was incredible. I am in no way making fun of the Amiga 500 because it was a serious machine in its day. And pretty popular. I mean, I think there were still people, you could still buy them like into the 90s. They use floppy disks and everything. And that's what's nice is that the emulator on the website lets you essentially, like simulate, it's an emulator. So it lets you emulate the disk drives and all that stuff. I'm not sure, how well you're going to get to play some games on it. And you might be better off just like, downloading an actual Amiga 500 emulator onto your computer and running from that. But this is nice to be able to do it in the cloud, or maybe to get a taste of real computer history, where we came from. Because again, the Amiga 500 was a serious computer. It was part of the Commodore line essentially. I had a lot of fun. I had a total blast from the past, I didn't get to, the Commodore 64 was more the machine that I loved growing up. But I remember when the Amiga 500 came out, and I guess it was maybe around 1990 when we had one in my house, in my parents' house, and I was only, I was like 9, 10 at the time. But it was beautiful. I mean, what it displayed on screen was nothing less than gorgeous. And the code was, the language to use it was, I thought it was better than getting to use DOS. Eons better than navigating DOS. So have a lot of fun with it. Go check it out. Again, links in the show notes for the Amiga 500 emulator, and just have fun. It's interesting to see these things, how this all really works. And I'll be back with more.
This is Stephanie Murphy, Sovryn Tech Producer. You may know me from this show, but did you know that I have my own podcast? It's called Pork Therapy. Pork Therapy is a bit different from other shows. We cover current events, big ideas, and even relationship issues, all through the lens of how we can get more freedom in our lives. Oh, and you'll love Sex and Science Hour. Join me on my website, porktherapy.com. That's porctherapy.com. Now back to Sovryn Tech. Hacker Stories.
It is time for Hacker Stories, where we talk security issues. For the past few months, really, it seems like every episode is about the NSA or the FBI, and me kind of ranting against them. Try not to do any rants this episode. Even though I got a lot of email, people saying, wow, keep up the epic rants, man. I mean, I can do it all the time. Years ago, I used to do it all the time on nowhere near as important things. But yeah, I'm trying to keep that down. Because, you don't want to go through life being that angry. But anyway, I do want to tell you about Passport to Freedom. This is an event. It's January 23rd to the 26th in Las Vegas, Nevada. I said I was going to be there, but now it is up to debate whether or not I'm going to be there. I'm really not sure. And the whole event is about, figuring out how to, maybe leaving the U.S. Because the U.S. is getting crazy. We're going to talk about how crazy it is. So, if you're interested in that, Peter Schiff's going to be there. Jeff Berwick's going to be there. Bobby Casey's going to be there. There's going to be, a whole slew of guests. And I guess it's going to be kind of a very intimate, event where, and then those are fun. They're nice from, in comparison to the big conferences. There's a place for both. But you're going to want to check this one out. And if you go to sovryntech.com, you go to the bottom left hand of the screen, you're going to see there's going to be a link there that says go to Passport to Freedom. If you click on that, okay, that'll take you to the webpage to check it out if you're interested in going. And, please don't hesitate to check it out. Though I will admit that, there's times where I think about leaving the U.S. I mean, I've been around the world pretty good, but I think about leaving the U.S. permanently at times. And, sometimes though, I get worried that, to get away from the U.S. and, all the nonsense that happens here. But, I could be going to a wedding, say, in another country, and it could be the right wedding, but it could be on the wrong day. And no thanks. So I would understand a person being, kind of tentative about wanting to leave the U.S. But anyway, if you're interested in that, please go to Passport to Freedom. But, according to the NSA, nothing is beyond their reach. And this is what our hacker story is about this week. This is coming from Forbes. This got, at least in my circles, it got a lot of press. I don't know how much press it got outside of that because, it's in Forbes. I guess that's good. But this is crazy. And its U.S. spy rocket has octopus theme, nothing is beyond our reach logo. Seriously. The Office of National Intelligence was very excited about sending a rocket into space Thursday with a bunch of new satellites and live tweeted its launch. This would usually be a cute display of social media along the lines of NASA getting the world excited about its Mars Curiosity rover, except these are spy satellites that will likely be used to gather communications flotsam and who knows what else from around the world. Dragnet surveillance is a touchy subject these days, what with the Snowden leaks and constant new revelations about cell phones being turned into location trackers, listening in on foreign leaders' phone calls, and the vacuuming up of any information sent digitally that's not encrypted. Given that, I was a little surprised that ODNI was bragging about the launch on Twitter and putting the mission patch for the rocket on prominent display as it looks like it was drawn by a writer for The Simpsons with his tongue firmly in cheek. Ready for launch, and Atlas V will blast off at just 11 p.m. PST carrying a classified NRO payload. Tweeted the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, including a pic of the logo for the satellite, a cartoon octopus wrapping its arms around the world, emblazoned, nothing is beyond our reach. It's maybe a little bit tone deaf given the current controversy about just how much is within the reach of the NSA and other intel agencies. Or maybe it's an attempt to embrace its new image. Kudos to the writer for having some humor on this because, wow. And anyway, NRO L39 is represented by the octopus, a versatile, adaptable, and highly intelligent creature. Emblematically, enemies of the United States can be reached no matter where they choose to hide, says Karen Ferguson, a spokesperson for the NRO, the National Reconnaissance Office. Nothing is beyond our reach defines this mission and the value it brings to our nation and the war fighters it supports, who serve valiantly all over the globe protecting our nation. It's amazingly cartoon-like for an agency with a $10.3 billion budget, and it is decidedly more ominous that the logos slapped on previous missions with the exception of a three-headed dragon licking the earth like an ice cream cone. The payload might be classified, but the Twitter account does share a few details. In addition, its primary payload, the rocket will also carry a dozen mini-satellites funded by the NRO and NASA. Tweets that founded in 1961, the NRO is the agency in charge of designing, building, launching, and maintaining America's intelligence satellites. In other words, spy satellites. The logo is certainly accurate, but maybe they should make it friendlier next time, like a big Care Bear circling its arms around the world, instead of a scary kraken. And of course, I totally agree. And there's so much wrong with this. There's absolutely so much wrong with this. There's some of the immediate points in that Nazi propaganda as well as anti-communist propaganda both represented the enemy, okay, with an octopus. Like there used to be this anti-communist things like communism is taking over the world, and it showed an octopus, putting its tentacles all over the earth. Or in Nazi Germany, you had, there was this octopus with its, its tentacles encapsulating the earth, and then there was a Jewish star above the octopus's head. So this is a symbol often used for the bad guys. Now, in that case, it's incredibly accurate, right? Because, if we're going to use the term and thought of bad guys, the NSA certainly qualify as such. Perhaps the baddest of the bad. And it's again, we've said constantly in the show the lack of intelligence and information these people actually really have. But you'd think someone would have known, and in fact, I was a propaganda man in the Army. I was in PsyOps, and we had to pay attention to things like symbology. It was important. Anywhere you went, you had to pay attention to symbology. And in fact, the octopus is generally used. It is not used for the good guys. I've never seen it used for the good guys. I'm sure someone will find that patch or that something where it was. Okay, so I don't want to say never. I'm just saying I've never seen it. Okay, not that I was in the propaganda business long. But I mean, this is the worst form you could possibly do. This is positively ridiculous that this is what they're using. And there were similar things that happened recently. Like there was the symbol for Obamacare back in, was that in 2008? The symbol for Obamacare was that kind of that Obama O with like the fields inside of it. And then it had, it had an eagle above the O, and it looked just like the Nazi symbol for the Nazi regime with the eagle and the circle underneath it with the swastika inside. Except in this case, they had an O inside of it, but it looked just like it. And so I don't know where the failing is. Maybe this is why all these people are trying to get PR on free media, or free marketing and free PR on Facebook and all these other websites and social media sites, is because, they're hiring a bunch of people that just have no clue how to do real marketing, or because that's what that is. I mean, using like the symbology for a lot of the stuff, it gives meaning. I mean, they usually put a whole lot of thought into this stuff, and somebody didn't put a lot of thought into this, or they were being as honest as they've ever been in saying two things. One, we are the bad guys, and two, we are everywhere. We are encapsulating the entire world. And it's not, again, if you can say, well, they were using it to strike fear into the enemies of the United States. Why would the United States use a symbol that it used for communism then? Well, I guess that was striking fear too, huh? But it brings it to light. I mean, just how exactly these people think, or the lack of thinking that they do. And there's a lot of patches. They mentioned one of them where it's like this 3-headed dragon licking the earth. There's a lot of these patches where if you like dig into the symbology of them, they'll creep you out. As far as like, wait a minute, aren't we nice? I thought that was like the whole thing is that America, we're the good, the U.S. is the good guys. I don't want to talk about America like it's my country or something, because I don't consider it to be. It's unbelievable. And in fact, I mean, to make it like the communism one's bad enough, but then to use the same symbol the Nazis used to represent the Jews controlling the world, which they really don't. I take offense to that. I take incredible offense to that. Just on that one alone, didn't even have to be the communism one. It's strange, and it makes you wonder. I mean, like if they really, and even the statement "nothing is beyond our reach," as in who gave them who exactly gave them permission to start looking into all these other countries and all this stuff. It's just like saying, I mean, and just break it down for people when you're talking to people about the nonsense that the NSA is pulling off. It's like, okay, well, I'm your neighbor and I want to put a camera and microphone in your house and I'm going to record it on my computer at home. Is that okay with you? Who's going to say okay? Nobody's going to say okay. And again, they're not just saying like the terrorists are beyond our reach. They're saying nothing is beyond our reach. I mean, they're just this is what I was talking about a couple episodes ago when I was saying that these guys are just being so brazen now. Really, they're just being so brazen in everything they do. There's no more hiding it. And the people that just keep supporting everything that they do, I don't even know, if it doesn't click now, when is it going to click for them? That, hey, these people don't have our interests at heart. I don't know. And I mean, and now they're, we talked about earlier in the show, they're having to get unpaid interns to do this stuff. Because I think most adults have the presence of mind to say, look, no, I'm not going to work for you. What you're doing is wrong. Not to say that young people are stupid, but maybe they haven't had enough experience yet to know when they're being sold a bad bill of goods. I'll be back with more.
What does freedom mean? Tune in to LRN.FM to find out. LRN.FM is the Liberty Radio Network, a collection of live talk radio and podcasts, all coming from a principled pro-liberty perspective. LRN.FM show hosts aren't left, right, or conspiracy kooks. You can tune in 24/7 to LRN.FM via your phone, computer, satellite, and more. Listen free anytime at LRN.FM. That's LRN.FM.
Would you like to play a game? Game of the week.
It is time for Game of the Week, where we talk about a game that maybe, got kind of missed by the popular, news venues like PCGamer.com or something, or, whoever, like GamePro back in the day, or, EGM, you take your pick. Maybe they missed something. Maybe there's a great game out there that was just under the radar or what, I don't know. But this is kind of another thing I like to do with Game of the Week is like, maybe there's something, this classic that was above the radar, that was on the radar that just deserves another play, deserves a good reinstall. And this one I am so excited about. And it's Final Fantasy VIII. And it just got released on Steam for PC. So if you've been a diehard PC gamer your whole life, now granted, I actually years ago, I torrented a copy of Final Fantasy VIII for PC, and I was able to play it then. It was actually called Ultimate Final Fantasy VIII, and it had a lot of really great features. So you might want to look for that instead if you're really that interested. But Final Fantasy VIII, maybe next to Final Fantasy IX, it's probably my favorite of the bunch for a lot of reasons. And a lot of people, how could you follow up? Because Final Fantasy VII is, by a lot of people, considered to be the greatest game of all time. And how do you follow that up? And really what Squaresoft tried to do, of course now it's Square Enix, but back then it was Squaresoft. What they tried to do way back, not, it's funny that that's way back, but it was 1999. Anyway, what they tried to do was, and there was a PC version released, like I said, again, in 2000. So, even if you were a diehard PC gamer, you just probably didn't miss it. Just maybe there were better games that you were playing at the time. But Final Fantasy VIII, again, is really great. And what they tried to do to top Final Fantasy VII is they just took all kind of the love story, the cheese, all the, the music, everything. They tried to take it to the next level. And they made all the characters look realistic instead of kind of super deformed like they were in a lot of Final Fantasy games. And so they just tried to bring everything up to 13, you know what I mean? Not to 11. They pumped it all up to 13. And I loved it. The romance story was ridiculously cheesy. The music is nothing less than beautiful. In fact, the opening music, holy shit. There's a song called Liberi Fatale. And even I've seen this performed live. And the music is, you get stirred. Now a lot of people say the game isn't anywhere near as epic as some of the music in it, but I disagree. I think the game is fantastically epic, wonderfully goes up into the stars later on. I'm not giving anything away, and of course there's the very famous dance sequence with the main character Squall and the lead female character, and they play the song "Eyes on Me," which again I recognize is cheesy, man, but boy was it beautiful, and it still gives me one tear, I gotta admit. I love it. I love Final Fantasy VIII. It has all the Final Fantasy trappings that everybody knows and loves. But at the same time, yes, it's really overboard. Some people complain about the dialogue, all blah, blah, blah. But I think it's fantastic. Really, really good. And the PC version that they released this year was remastered because, there was they did a big 25th anniversary release in December of 2012 in Japan. So, but this is a remastered edition and it really looks a lot better. I think it's only $12 on Steam. But check it out on YouTube. That's what I did. Check it out on YouTube first, make sure it looks that good. But I think this is a game that's definitely worth a replay that a lot of people might not have, it fell prey to some bad press. because a lot of people said, yeah, it's Final Fantasy VIII, but it's not really Final Fantasy VII. And I think what people really wanted out of Final Fantasy VIII was they wanted more adventures, of Cloud. You know what I mean? They wanted the characters from 7. They wanted Tifa Lockhart to come back. That's what they wanted. They didn't want all new characters, and that's what they ended up with. But I consider it a better game than 7. Maybe not as good as 9, but it's pretty close. And like I said, the romantic cheese factor of it is absolutely inspiring to me, and I really, really appreciate that. So Final Fantasy VIII, it's available on Steam now. Go grab it. I'll be back with more. We don't have to what? What do you mean you don't have to take your clothes off? What a bunch of Okay, no, you don't have to take your clothes off to have a good time, but come on, we all want to, don't we? Who writes lyrics like that? I can't believe it. Anyway, let's get back to Sovryn Tech.
Hey, what are you doing? I can't believe I caught you again. Jesus doesn't approve of this little habit of yours.
I know, baby, I know it's wrong, but it feels so right.
Well, it ain't.
But I've been doing it since I was 12 years old.
It's nothing but a sinful perversion of nature, if you ask me.
But, baby, I don't ever want to stop looking at tech websites, new gadgets, video games, software, or any of that stuff.
Well, then I'm leaving.
Okay. Bye.
Pick of the week.
It is time for Pick of the Week, where I geek out. I talk about whatever I want to talk about. It could be a movie, a topic. It could be another video game, even though I already have Game of the Week. Pretty much anything. You name it. A novel, a comic. I love comic books. A product even. Take your pick. I can talk about, or actually, it's for me to pick. That's why it's Pick of the Week. And this week, I'm going to talk about a couple movies because I think they're important to compare and contrast. And the movie that inspired me to talk about this for Pick of the Week was Jobs. Of course, that is the movie about Steve Jobs, starring Ashton Kutcher. And the second movie I want to talk about is Pirates of Silicon Valley. Which had Noah Wiley, was that his name, playing Steve Jobs in that. That was a TNT miniseries from the late 90s, which was a phenomenal film. It's like 3 hours long, totally worth the watch. But anyway, with Jobs, I didn't really like it. It felt, where Pirates of Silicon Valley, I thought was decently honest, and showed kind of the, I thought it showed, because Pirates of Silicon Valley is essentially, Jobs is clearly all about Steve Jobs. That's the whole point of the movie. And so Pirates of Silicon Valley was mainly about, with some scenes showing the late 90s, but it was mainly about the 80s and kind of the battle between Microsoft and Apple in the 80s, between Steve Jobs and Bill Gates. So there's a lot of Bill Gates in Pirates of Silicon Valley, as to where in Jobs there isn't, because it's mainly about Steve Jobs. And I felt Pirates of Silicon Valley was very very balanced, and it was, we weren't there, we can't necessarily know, but it felt pretty accurate and believable as to how everything went down. As to where Jobs admittedly felt like showing like Steve Jobs was just like, he just had brilliant idea after brilliant idea after brilliant idea. And everything was inspiration. Like all of this was just inspiration. I mean, it just seemed it seemed like such a puff piece. It seemed like a love letter. And so, I didn't feel, there was it kind of showed some bad things. Like it showed Steve Jobs kind of like flipping out at times on workers, which, I don't agree with him on that. I enjoyed, and this is true. Steve Jobs had a search for perfection, and simplicity and good design. Okay. And that's wonderful. And I'm so glad he had all that, and he had great taste. I'm so glad for all that. And the movie also did accurately show that he wasn't like as great a programmer or as great that Steve Wozniak, his friend who co-founded Apple with him, they were the two main guys, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, which I love Woz. It gave credit to Woz where credit was due. It didn't make it like Steve Jobs did everything. But it felt, I don't know, it really felt like they were treating Steve Jobs like he was Jesus. And there wasn't even a lot of, they kind of showed it, his relationship with his child, but there wasn't nearly as much of that craziness as there was with like Pirates of Silicon Valley, where it definitely showed the real eccentricities, and even more so the asshole nature, I thought, of Steve Jobs than normally gets portrayed. But it was still, it was an entertaining film to watch, and they did get some things right. And you can say that, it's sort of, that it still showed Steve Jobs doing a lot of very, very mean, and very cutthroat things, but it all showed those cutthroat things as being positive, as being a net gain. It kind of like, I thought it gave Johnny Ives way too much credit. Johnny Ives is the designer of the iPod and the iMac and a whole bunch of other things. Him and Jobs, they really created the modern Apple. And I thought it treated Johnny Ives like he was, the Apostle Peter or something. And so I didn't like I was almost getting diabetes from all the, the sweetness and light that was in this. And that really annoyed me. Because I'm not saying Steve Jobs was a bad guy. I think he was an incredible human being, that actually in many ways did propel, the human race forward. He really did. And a lot of the movie, talks about how, did he make that he wanted to make a dent in the universe. And yes, I think Steve Jobs made a dent in the universe, no doubt about it. But it was way too, the film felt very, very culty, as to where, Pirates of Silicon Valley still showed Steve Jobs as the hero, no doubt about it. But at the same time, it just seemed far more honest. Granted, it had more time to show more story, right? But not really, because Pirates of Silicon Valley had to show the rise of Steve Jobs as well as the rise of Bill Gates. And in fact, and also Steve Ballmer, for that matter. And I thought the casting choices for Pirates of Silicon Valley were far better as far as actors go. So, if you're looking for that film that, that really encapsulates, this incredible time in human history, where these two companies, were really duking it out to bring a computer to everybody, to every single human being if possible. I recommend Pirates of Silicon Valley. I don't consider Jobs to be the better of the two, by any means. And in fact, really, there's plenty, especially now, ever since he died, people have been putting out a lot of lost footage of Steve Jobs. And there's a lot of great stuff to find on YouTube, like hours long stuff, of interviews of Steve Jobs, where if you really want to get an insight into his genius, because he was a genius, no doubt about it. It's just not everything he did was somehow this grand inspiration. Okay. I think the fact that he came up with multiple fonts is, it's incredible, but I think that gets overplayed a little bit. That's amazing. Okay. But if you want some real insight into the genius of Steve Jobs, I recommend checking out some of those other videos. And some of those videos, from the early 80s, really primetime stuff, or Steve Jobs in his prime, I should say. And, you know, I mean, but there are things about Steve Jobs that I really, really liked. In fact, there's a saying I use a lot that comes from him. And it's not the one about "this is for the crazy ones." If you don't know that speech, look it up. It's a tremendous speech. I agree. Crazy ones are the ones that actually do change the world. Totally agree with that. But that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is that when Steve Jobs' wife came up to him and said, "Look, we need to go buy a sofa." Okay. And Steve Jobs says, now again, this story unfortunately isn't in either film, but it's my favorite one. Steve Jobs says, okay, let's think about what's the purpose of a sofa? Why do we need a sofa? And it wasn't because he didn't have the money. I mean, it's Steve Jobs. Okay, have you seen his yacht? He has the money. But he was trying to get at, he's like, okay, why do I want this in my life? He was getting down to the absolute bare bones, nitty gritty, almost the Planck scale of why something would be a part of his life, or even just, something be in his house. And I think that's a tremendous way to look at everything. Very similar to what Carl Sagan was saying in the beginning of this show, where he's saying that we have to understand, why we're in this world, or, why we do what we do in this world, or what makes the world what it is right now. All of these things. And so I really love that story. And that's a great attitude to have with anything. It's like, okay, wait a minute. Before I do this, why? That's the nature of therapy, right? Or of philosophy. So unfortunately, that's not in either film. The guy was a genius, no doubt about it. Just Jobs, again, it felt so cliched, so cliched with everything. And it just made him look like this kind of messianic figure that he may not have been. Maybe somebody, I want to see a Gates. That's the next movie I want to see is Gates. Because I think that's actually the far more interesting story. Now, I'm no fan of Microsoft, never really have been. Okay. But I want to see that movie because Gates is the guy that's had the interesting history, where, some people claim that he read, that the reason, his ascension to essentially, becoming at one point the richest man in the world came from the fact that he read Charles Hannell's The Master Key System, which used to be a banned book. And boy, Google that if you don't know anything about the Master Key System. I'm not endorsing it. I'm just saying, if you don't know about it, this is something to know about. There's also the idea what happened in the 90s with Bill Gates and the government, to where the government literally brought this man to tears, which no one needs to, that doesn't need to happen to anyone. It's a very incredible story to look into. And I'm curious if it was ever done on film, how that would turn out. In Pirates of Silicon Valley kind of lays him out as sort of a slimy character. And I don't know that he was a slimy character. He's definitely self-interested, but then who isn't? And again, that's the far more interesting movie to watch. In fact, there's a great moment where, because, okay, Apple, the big thing with Apple was Macintosh. Okay, was the graphic user interface, the GUI, the graphical user interface. Okay. Now, Apple copied Xerox. Okay, and the classic line that, in fact, I don't think this line was in Jobs, but it's in Pirates of Silicon Valley, where he says that, true artists don't create, they steal. And it's so funny to see Jobs to see Steve Jobs in Pirates of Silicon Valley, because here he is taking Xerox's ideas for a GUI, for a graphic user interface. And then when Microsoft gets a look at it, when Bill Gates gets a look at it and copies it and releases it before the Macintosh comes out, he gets mad at Bill Gates. And there's this classic line from the movie where he goes, he just screams, "You're stealing from us." And it's an incredible moment. But it's ironic because here's Jobs saying real artists, don't create, they steal. Well, okay, fine. Bill Gates stole from you, but you stole in the first place. And if real artists steal, then Bill Gates is the real artist. So that's what I'm saying. Jobs, I didn't feel was an honest picture at all. And what can be, yeah, I get that. Okay. But, I think there can be some degree of fidelity and consistency in a film. And I think Pirates of Silicon Valley offers the far better experience all the way around. And it tells both sides of the story. In fact, also, Jobs didn't another classic line that I enjoy from Apple or from Steve Jobs is, it's better to be a pirate than to join the Navy. I don't think that was said in the movie Jobs either. But in Pirates of Silicon Valley, you get all that. So I just a far better film. Anyway, check both of them out if you really want, but if you can only watch one, watch Pirates of Silicon Valley. I'm sure it's on Netflix or Amazon Prime or something, or you can download it. Nothing wrong with that. You know, better to be a pirate than to join the Navy, right? Anyway, Carpe Lucem. Again, got a great special coming out this week on Wednesday, Christmas Day. Happy Saturnalia, everybody. One more time, Carpe Lucem. See you next week.
This has been Sovryn Tech. Visit us at sovryntech.com. That's SOVRYN tech.com. There you can connect with us, see more of what you've heard on today's show, and catch our podcast feed. Sovryn Tech is open source. We encourage you to share. Later, nerds.